Egyptian fishermen were fishing when suddenly hundreds of giant mangoes appeared. They frantically bit and killed everyone, causing the normally peaceful river to suddenly be filled with fresh blood. In the palace, the queen woke up in panic, wake up with countless poisonous frogs, fish in the river because of pollution. They die white on the surface of the water. Their corpses cause flies to multiply crazily, darkening the sky. Grasshopper are raging everywhere, destroying crops. Not only that, but there are storms and flood, tsunami. Natural disasters continue to occur constantly, turning a beautiful land into literal hell on earth. But why do the Egyptian people have to suffer such terrible wrath from the gods? Please join me in following the process of the movie to answer your question. During the time when Egypt's first pharaoh Seti was still alive, there was a strong Greek empire. They had a strong army and were very powerful. Good fighting put Egypt in a dangerous situation, so the pharaoh ordered his two best sons, Ramset and Moses, to give them two precious swords to destroy the T empire. But the man with many hairs was Ramset. Moses is the biological son of Pharaoh, but Moses has a hairy mouth like him. My boss is just an adopted son. However, Moses is the most talented general in Egypt. That's why the prankster is always jealous of his younger brother talent. Receiving order from Pharaoh, the two brothers immediately sent troops to fight T. Because of their selfishness, Ramset took over the right to direct the army. The younger brother, Moses, was helpless to see how his older brother performed like an idiot. 10,000 elite cavalry rushed straight into the enemy. Seeing this, Moses behind immediately ordered the archers to release arrows to open the way. Thanks to that, when his brother galloped on horseback, the Greek army had defeated nearly half of them and quickly sent 7 soldier defense battle. But the Egyptian cavalry team was so powerful that they broke through those defense and rushed inside the barracks. However, with their shrimp heads, Ramset still could not completely dominate. He was even defeated. When the enemy attacked him, he fell face down on the ground. Right when the thief almost went to sell salt under the enemy general's sword, Moses appeared in time to stop him, not caring about his own life to save him, but he was afraid. He was jealous and just stood there watching. Not only that, he also tried to pick up his brother's skewer, but fortunately, before he could act, soldier escorted him out of the battlefield. But was it because Bang hated Moses' talent? The cruel bastard wanted to kill his younger brother so much that a few days before, these was a prophecy that made the prisoners worried and restless. Every time the Egyptians fought, they would kill a goose and extort it. At this time, the priestess prophesied that during the battle with Hit, Prince Ramset would be saved by someone, and that person who helped wound later have the whole world. Today the villain was saved, so he wanted to kill his younger brother to avoid future disaster. He returned to the present because of his poor performances and was cursed by the pharaoh like a pawn. He knew that if he gave in, if you give me a golden day, the world will have Tai bin and the people will be prosperous and happy. However, he is not his biological son, so that will not happen. Only royal bloodlines like Ramset will be able to succeed Pharaoh, although the king had already said so. But the prankster was still jealous of his younger brother because he believed in that prophecy more than. The next day Moses went to the quarry to check the status of the pyramid construction and discovered the AI people. Egypt captured tens of thousands of Jews as slaves, where they were brutally abused and exploited. During one time the male protagonist visited the slaves. A man recounted that he was not a slave. The Egyptians previously had a prophecy saying that God would send to earth a brave child to liberate and bring freedom to the unfortunate Jews. This prophecy reached Pharaoh's ears, so he ordered to kill all 4,000 Jewish boys born at that time. But Moses was the only child lucky enough to survive. His parent took him to Egypt to work as a waiter after the male protagonist returned. When Pharaoh Seti I fell seriously ill and passed away, Ramset became king, but he was informed by his subordinates that Moses was a Jew. After hearing this, he became angry and exiled his younger brother to a place far away from anyone. When Moses left, he only brought the sword that the king gave him, but the evil-minded villain sent someone to assassinate Moses. But how could they fight against the greatest general in Egypt, with just a few basic roads? He sent 2 assassins off to sell salt, male protagonist. Just like that, going through the mountains and across the sea, he accidentally came to a village and rescued the people here from the rule of bandits. The village chief saw him as a savior, so he married his beautiful daughter to Mosette. That night, the male protagonist finally realized that his potato was not just for peeing. Time flew by. 9 years had passed in Egypt. This was criticized by Ramset because in an extreme and brutal way, he brutally oppressed and exploited the Jews, forcing them to build the most majestic monument in the world, in which the pyramid and his tomb had to be built. Most importantly, if anyone shows signs of fatigue as a worker, he will kill them to set an examples on this side. He has a happy life with his wife and son. One time, when he brought goats to the village, he was unfortunately attracted. At that moment, an angel in the form of a young boy appeared and told him that he was the chosen one to rescue all the Jewish people in Egypt. Following the angel words, he decided to say goodbye to his wife and children, to set out to save his people. He rode alone to Egypt and saw his people falling into misery. His heart ached, And at this time Ramsed also had a son with a sword, sneaking into the palace to tell his brother, a guard, that God would punish Egypt. But the unbelievers challenged God. Later that night, he ordered his soldier to kill Moses and the people in the palace. His brother family hanged 3 Jews to set an example for the slaves. But the Jews at this time did not know pain or fear anymore, and they even agreed with Moses to stand up and participate in the final war, to regain freedom for himself. Because he was once the best general in Egypt, he quickly trained the Jews to become excellent warriors, and gave them a strong will that the Jews' blood may be shed, but absolutely will not be enslaved that night. Moses' men began to set fire to Egyptian civilization, attacking Ramsed oil transport boats, early in the morning. He saw the angel looking towards him, Egypt, with a passionate expression on his face. The boy said that if this continues, it may take him. Decided to regain his freedom. Let the gods help. Just as the angel said, the gods were angry. The first thing with the Egyptian people was the John Mango disaster on the Nile River. They quietly swam out to the fishermen fishing boats and then jumped up to attack the young man. Even though he tried to climb onto the boat, couldn't, still unable to avoid death very quickly. The blood dyed an entire river red with thousands of bloodthirsty crocodile. Immediately after, the second disaster also struck the fish in the river, dyeing white because the water source was seriously polluted. AI people Egypt also did not know the reason why Moses saw blood dyeing the sky red. Flowers and food were wiped out in just one night after these terrible events. So he believed that the angel words about the 10 disaster of God were true. Very quickly the third disaster also came. Millions of crazy frogs flooded into Egypt. Their presence was seen in every corner. Even the queen and wife of Ramsed, who was sleeping soundly in the palace, had to wake up in panic and scream. Ton cried out, holding his child and looking at his wife helplessly, not knowing what to do. After the frogs died, the Wednesday disaster also came. Their bodies decomposed, creating an environment for the flies to mutate, and the Jews suffered. They were used to suffering, so no matter how many difficulties they encountered, they were not afraid of the Egyptians. On the contrary, before they had eaten well, they were favored by the Pharaoh, so when they encountered major disaster, they screamed in despair, because this swarm of flies caused many Egyptians to become infected with infectious diseases, including the guy who teased that this is the 5th disaster, that the plague spread faster than the way your ex-lover said goodbye. So Ramsed took out all his anger on the Jews, doubling working hours but reducing food and water. Even women and children were no exception. Under his oppression, the entire family, the animals, all vomited blood and died for unknown reason. The food was almost gone and now it was even more depleted. He continued to anger the Jewish people by hanging many more slaves and wrongdoers. His action will certain come at the cost of the 6th disaster. For the first time in Egyptian history, a giant hailstorm appeared. Anyone who goes out at this time can die. However, God's punishment also makes Moses angry. He said that not only the Egyptians were damaged, but also the Jewish people were seriously affected. The next great disaster was the locusts, which were like a ghostly cloud that covered the whole sky. These locusts not only destroy crops, but also know how to eat human flesh. It must be said that they do not criticize anything on their flight path, but in Vietnam, locusts have become a specialty on the drinking table. While Egypt was in chaos, the Jewish people quickly ran in to steal the remaining food in the warehouse. But they did not know that Ramsed had also calculated this. When they returned, how many of his soldiers had been killed. Surrounding the whole place, the provocateur brutally massacred the slaves he thought were trash. That night, MES came to see the angel again, because Ramsed was still stubborn and refused to give in. The angel was very angry, and the next disaster would come, show him who is the real God, knowing that if these things continue, both the Egyptians and the Jews will fall into a state of death and misery. Moses immediately went to his brother to make an agreement, but the prankster said that this is just an empty threat. His arrogance is truly too great. The male lead know that this disaster is inevitable. He tells all the Jewish people that if they want to survive, they should kill sheep and take their blood. If they draw this in front of the door, then the great tribulations will pass. Just as the angel said, the 9th great disaster began to approach Egypt. At this time, darkness has covered everywhere. The Jews also did as Moses commanded. Both young and old must stay indoors tonight. But the Egyptian children were not so quickly. When darkness passed, all the Egyptian children were killed by God, even Ramsed's son. Unbelievable to escape, he held his son's body in pain in his arms and did not know what to do. So the next morning he went to MES to make an agreement. Because he saw that the Egyptians had suffered too much punishment from the Lord, he had to accept it. I was helpless to let my younger brother lead all 400,000 Jewish slaves away. I immediately led all my people to the Red Sea, because if we crossed the Red Sea, everyone would be free. Before they left, they did not forget to raise their hands. Thank God, the thief had to embalm his son's body. In extreme anger, his wife also became crazy because of the loss of child. Unable to bear this attack, she personally led all of his soldiers, let go wipe out all the Jews. At this time, Moses also learned the news, so he led 400,000 people along a quick shortcut towards the Red Sea, but when he arrived, he realized that this was a dead end with no boats. How can we cross to the other side and swim? Is it possible that the Jewish people will be extinct here? Moses, disappointed, threw the sword into the sea. The next morning, everyone prepared themselves for a worst outcome. Suddenly, the sea water miraculously receded, realizing that God had came to the rescue, so she immediately led all the people across the sea as quickly as possible, but the bald man army was about to catch up. But on the way here, his army encountered a terrible landslide that caused many soldiers to resign. Perhaps it was a harbinger of the third disaster, if he continued to hunt down civilians. Tai, however, did not care. So he walked towards the Red Sea and saw that his brother was no longer far away from him, so he immediately urged the people to run quickly to the other shore. Then he and his warriors was also ready for the fine death battle. At this moment, the sky suddenly burst with thunder and lightning, the wind and storm arose, followed by a great flood. Ramset's soldiers were so scared that they were in a hurry. Run away for your life. Only the prankster was left. Seeing this, Moses ordered his men to retreat. He and Ramset would settle their grievance right here. Very quickly, the prankster's entire army was overwhelmed, kept rolling back to the western paradise, and his brother, before he could do anything, was engulfed by the wave. On this side, 400,000 Jews reached safety and the Egyptian army died, filling the sea with one thing, by some miracle. Moses also survived the cataclysm hundreds of meters high. In the end, he succeeded in liberating the nation. I escaped from slavery. This is the end of the movie. Hello and see you again, everyone.